Stop Instagramming your breakfast and getting on YouTube so you can see Gangnam Style.
Gangnam Style.
And start using those precious social media skills to go out and sign people up.
I got a bum knee.
The lasso again, and then the horseback.
Who knew that Alan Simpson could dance Gangnam Style? That's part of the cankicksback.org. He's part of this big debate over what to do about the fiscal cliff. We're going to bring in our roundtable now to talk about it all. George Will. Welcome back to George Will. Nobel Prize-winning economist Paul Krugman of the New York Times, ABC's Matthew Dowd, and my favorite audience, James Carville and Mary Matalin. Thanks all for coming in. So, George, we just heard the lawmakers there as far apart as ever with just 23 days to go. Is there any way out of this?
Well, conceptually, obviously, we're dealing here with splittable differences, numbers, how high rates ought to be. We've, in our country, had really unsplittable differences. Abortion today, expansion of slavery into the territories, differences you really couldn't compromise on. This is doable. The problem, George, is since the Second World War, really through all of American history, our politics has been about allocating abundance. Now we're allocating scarcity, and we're not very good at it. We haven't had much practice. And I would like to postulate that the real problem in the country today isn't the divisions we talk so much about, it's a consensus. As broad as the Republic, as deep as the Grand Canyon, and it is this. We should have an ever more generous welfare state and not pay for it.
Paul Krugman.
Oh, boy. Yeah. I mean, I think it's actually, it's not just numbers, because we have a basic difference in outlook. And I think part of the problem is the Republicans are unable to actually make concrete proposals. If you actually look, all that talk we just heard about, deficits in China and Greece, which is all nonsense, but all that talk about how we need to deal with this, and ask, what is the Republican Party currently proposing? What have they actually put on the table? They put down some numbers, but what specifics? If you look at all of the things that they've concretely mentioned, all of their actual proposed spending cuts on, raising the Medicare age, cutting the price index for Social Security, it's about $300 billion.
Higher Medicare premiums on the wealthy.
Yeah, it's tiny. What they've actually put on the table is almost nothing. All the rest is just big talk. So how is the president supposed to negotiate with people who say, here's my demands, by the way, I can't give you any specifics, just make me happy?
That is the point the White House keeps making, Mary, that they can't give the Republicans what they don't ask for.
That's completely mendacious, as was that. The Republicans have offered, in theory and in specificity, for instance, to raise revenues, capping various deductions, not eliminating and capping them, which the CBO says would raise $1.7 trillion over 10 years. They've been very specific.
That doesn't work. That kills charitable deductions. It hits the middle class hard. If you do it right, we've done this, right?
Are you an economist or a polemicist?
There's only $450 billion that you can get by doing that.
Or do you want to talk about polemics?
No,
we have two different ways of going forward. We will not have Medicare. We will not have Social Security. You have senior Democrat Dick Durbin saying Social Security is not costing us a penny. You had those congressmen, those Democrats saying that Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security are not the driver of this debt. Even the president disagrees with this. What these guys should do, Coburn is right. This is meaningless. They should either give him the 98% and let him eat that tax hit, or they should do what President Clinton proposed, which is just extend it for 3 months and let the new Congress, we have a new Congress. How is it fair that the outgoing Congress that lost is making this?
Well, they're the ones who voted for it.
Yeah. First of all, what we want to do, what Paul and I want to do is we want to raise taxes. We want to raise tax rates. We're very clear on that. When you say you want to close loopholes, that does not count. You have to tell us which ones. Just a generic thing to say we're going to close loopholes. You're going to close charitable, you're going to close home mortgage, you're going to close state and local deduction, you're going to close local finance. What is it that you're going to do? The generic statement doesn't count. We are very clear about what we want to do. We're not enhancing revenue or anything. We're talking about raising taxes.
By the way, one thing that had me mad when Hensarling was talking, he said, well, the president hasn't proposed any specific spending cuts. You look at that proposal. It's got very specific spending cuts. I mean, it's a fantasy document that's not going to happen. No, the stuff that's in looking forward, there are major Medicare spending cuts. They're cuts in mostly falling on providers, not on beneficiaries. But there's a lot of detail in there. I mean, this is
Professor, if you cut a provider, that doesn't cut the beneficiary?
No, it doesn't.
Is that an economic reality?
No,
if you cut a provider, you're going to cut with the beneficiary.
Not true.
Go ahead.
Not true in this case.
George, you know I've spent a lot of time out in the country. I was in Norfolk talking to a whole bunch of folks about this. To me, this is really not a fiscal problem. This is actually a really leadership problem. If you watch what happened just right before we came on, the American public sees that and says, what's going on in Washington? What values do we stand for as a country? What do we really stand for? With both sides basically taking out positions where the American public is basically a pawn in the positions of both sides in this. And so if you ask yourself, if both sides sat down and asked themselves, what values do we stand for? What do we represent? Do we represent a value of shared sacrifice? Do we represent a value of balanced budgets and fiscal responsibility? And even though people make the argument, like Paul does, that we don't need to worry about that, we try to convey values to the American public so that we say this is what we stand for.
But to go to George's point, every time the value of shared sacrifice is presented to the public, they seem to reject it pretty resoundingly.
Well, that's because we keep the Washington, D.C. keeps telling the American public, you can have your cake and eat it too. We keep saying that it's the American public's fault if they just want all these things, but we as leaders, keep telling them the exact same thing we tell them not to do. We tell them it.
You know, this is exactly what we're doing. We are giving the American people $10 worth of government and charging them about $6.50 for it. And of course they think it's a good deal. We have made big government cheap. It seems to me, Paul, first of all, you may not like the Ryan budget. You've made that clear over time. But the House has twice passed the Ryan budget and sent it to the Senate. They could have acted on it.
But the Ryan budget is full of magic asterisks too. It's not a real budget. It's a fake document. I mean, I'm amazed that people haven't gotten that. But, you know, we're now a couple of years into the Ryan thing, and the fact that he doesn't actually present real budgets.
Well, I have yet to encounter someone who disagrees with you, who you don't think is a knave or a corrupt knave.
No, I've got some people, but anyway.
But anyway, specifics have indeed been offered. But again, the question is, are the American people ideologically and rhetorically conservative but operationally liberal? We're in the process of calling some bluffs.
That's for George, I wrote a book about this. We have not grown incomes in this country to any degree since the 70s. And people have watched this come. And they've watched wars come, and they've watched tax cuts come, and they've watched bailouts come, and their incomes hadn't gone down. And then somebody comes up and says, right now, after the election, you're the cause of this. We're gonna, and you know, if they cut Medicare and Social Security without really laying a predicate, they're gonna have a TARP-like reaction to that. And people are saying, why am I paying for all of the mistakes that these guys made over the last 30 years? I've had no growth in my income, and the top 1% has had 250%. That's what the average guy thinks out there.
That's half.
I don't know if that's, I can't tell him he's wrong.
That's half true. That's half true. And then the other side says, you know who's at fault in this? It's those rich people are at fault. And we'll find a way to solve all your problems, and you're not going to have to share sacrifice if we just tax the rich more. Right. What I'm saying is both sides have to actually come to the conclusion that if we want to tell the American public that balancing your checkbook is a good idea, having a sense of shared sacrifice is a good idea, personal responsibility is a good idea, helping your community is a good idea, Washington, D.C. ought to act on all those same values that we want the American public in their neighborhoods to act on.
But the people who are going to, a lot of them share those values. A lot of people sat there and worked hard and played by the rules and saw their income stagnate or go down. And they saw the deficit go up, and they saw bad wars and bad decisions being made. And now we want them to pay for it, and they're not overly happy about it, and I can't blame them. And
this does present, I think, a political problem, Mary, for the Republicans on this, the tax increases for the 98%. That happens on January 1st. It does seem very difficult that you're going to get all of this resolved by December 31st. So doesn't that put the pressure?
That makes my point. I'm taking the Clinton position here, that to try to, with the president repeatedly wasting week after week after week to have a political, be able to blame the Republicans politically for this, that's the problem. All this, Medicaid's a problem, all the structural debt is a problem. We do have declining wages. They've declined faster under the Obama recovery than under the Bush recession. But that's a whole separate problem that goes to education, goes to regulatory reform, goes to tax reform. It's all of a piece. You can't just take this piecemeal. Republicans will have a problem if they capitulate on their principles. And I just want to make one little point. In reality, in the real world, The Republicans, while we're looking dismal at the federal level, have won the majority of governorships and the majority of state legislatures. And in those cases, they are lowering taxes. They are flattening the tax rate. They are balancing their budgets, and they're creating jobs and growing their economies at twice the rate of this Keynesian lunacy that the president continues to pursue.
Can I just make a case
Make a point, and then we got to take a break.
Piecemeal is actually the way to deal with this. We have a short-run problem, which is a purely political problem about this fiscal cliff. Has nothing to do with the bondholders, has nothing to do with the debt. We should solve that and then work on whatever our long-term solution is going to be.